Hello friends, I hope you had a great weekend. Welcome back to Bush Poppy Farm. It is that time of year again. It's the end of spring, summer solstice has just passed, and it is time to take softwood cuttings of some of the perennials in our yard that we want to propagate and make more of for free. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Before we start, I got to say a couple things about propagation. So there are certain plants, and if you know the varieties and the types that you have, you can look them up, that are patented. And you cannot, by law, propagate them or sell them. There are also plants that are trademarked, registered trademarked, that it's a bit iffy, but you might be able to propagate them but not sell them. So just, do your due diligence. Now, I am a stickler for this because, for me personally, because I have seen by visiting different growers what goes into creating new varieties, and it's multiple years of work, of science that goes into this, lots of money and lots of time, and lots of research. So I don't do that. I don't propagate things that are patented or even trademarked. I just buy them. So yeah, that's me. It's not like there's like police are going to come and check if you do this in your own yard. I'm not advocating that you do, but I'm just saying these are the laws. So, I tend to be, for the most part, a rule follower until I see injustice, and then I am not a rule follower. But in this case, it's not injustice. So we are going to be taking cuttings from non-trademarked plants. In fact, most of these that we're, I think all of these that we're taking cuttings from don't even have variety names. Like they're just sold as like Buddleia or Penstemon, so they're safe to do. So what is a softwood cutting? Every year when perennials and deciduous plants and trees break dormancy, they start putting on new growth. And that new growth is soft and pliable. And then after around August, September timeframe, that new growth gets hard and it becomes more semi-woody or woody. So if you think about like lavender, for instance, that will grow a whole bunch of fresh, beautiful, wavy new growth. But if you don't cut your lavender back and you leave it, over time, the woody part of the lavender gets longer and longer and longer because that is all previous year's growth that is turning into the wood of the plant. So we like to take softwood cuttings in the summertime. So generally late spring to early summer time frame. And what that allows you to do is to take a cutting of fresh growth that has all these new hormones in it and root it and have a new plant that has time to grow out before the cold weather sets in. At which time you can either keep it potted up and grow it on and grow it into bigger and bigger pots, or plant it into your landscape. It just depends on the variety that you're doing and what their cold tolerance is, all that kind of stuff. So you'll have to do your research on individual plants. Generally, you can just do an internet search and ask how to propagate blah, whatever the plant is. And if you want to do softwood cuttings, put that in the search terms as well. And it'll tell you, what you can do with that particular variety. So we're going to be doing some super easy ones today. I have Buddleia that is, I just did a hard cutback on one of my Buddleia, and I don't want to take cuttings from that because I just did a hard cutback. But the one in the vegetable garden is enormous and has tons and tons and tons of new growth on it. We will take some cuttings from that. I'm going to take probably 4 to 6 cuttings from every plant. The reason for that is not all of these are going to take. If we're lucky and they all do, and I can root them on into bigger pots, I can always give them to friends or other people who want them. My goal here is to propagate a bunch of perennials that I can put out at the farm. So again, I don't have to spend a bunch of money on buying plants to put at the farm. I want to expand the number of perennials we have out there that we can cut on. Penstemon's a great one, and so is buddleia. Those are actually work great as cut flowers. So I do want to expand that, and I want to have more and more perennial beds out there. So best, cheapest way to do that is by creating my own. And what I'll be doing is we'll be taking these cuttings, I'll be rooting them. That could take 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, just depends on the plant. And then I'll be growing them on in the greenhouse in bigger and bigger pots so that when we go to plant them out of the farm, they're much larger plants. I want them to be able to just take off and serve and do really well. I don't want to plant small seedlings of perennials. It takes them a longer time to grow, so they're more subject to a lot of things that can happen to them because it takes them a long time to go from, you know, their seedling stage to a decent size where they can fight off predators. So I would like to keep them in a controlled environment in the greenhouse so that I can keep them safe and we can get a nice, healthy, big plant. So what do we need to do these hardwood cuttings? Well, first we need some containers, and I save all of the plastic that I get and I wash it and sterilize it and reuse it for things like this. I will also use these to bump up tomatoes and peppers and things like that in the spring when it's still too cold to plant out. I'll just have a big stockpile of these that I can use. So even though it's plastic, I'm trying to get as many uses as possible out of these. So I have washed this with soap and water. I have sterilized it. I use a little bit of a tiny bit of bleach in a lot of water, like maybe a teaspoon in a gallon of water, and then that gets sterilized. And so the new seedlings, the cuttings that we're going to take, aren't going to be exposed to any potential diseases, right? Because they're already going to have a struggle. We're going to remove all of the things that support them. We're taking them off the mother plant. They won't have a root system yet, so they have to work all their energy into creating that root system. And if they're having to fight a disease as well, they're just not going to survive. So we have a bunch of these, and I have I put them in this black tray that does not drain. I will keep them moist in here, and I will actually cover the whole thing. Once we get the whole thing planted up and the medium all moist, we are going to put a humidity dome over the whole thing. Now, this is kind of a crucial part of taking cuttings. Like I said, they don't have a root system, which is where they get most of their water to keep the plant hydrated. So you need to keep the environment around them hydrated. And they need to be kept around 65 to 75 degrees. You don't want it to be too hot and definitely not too cold because they need to grow. So I'm going to put them in a bright spot in the greenhouse, but not in direct sun. And when we get the cuttings themselves, I'll show you how we prepare those to get them in the soil. So speaking of soil, you can take cuttings and root them in lots of different mediums. You can use pure perlite. I have a bag right here that I just mixed in with a bunch of potting soil. You can use pure perlite. I've done that before. It's pretty good at holding moisture, but it does dry out really fast. So I prefer to mix a ton of perlite in with just regular potting soil. And then I also have in the past rooted into just horticultural sand. I've also mixed potting soil with horticultural sand. All of that is for free draining, but also for holding some moisture. See, you don't want them to stay wet, but you don't want them to dry out. So it's a delicate balance. So let's look at that soil right now. Okay, so here's our mix. It is, like you can see, a ton of perlite. This is so that it drains really well and retains some more moisture. And the soil mix itself also will help retain moisture. So I'm going to fill these. I'm going to fill them dry, and then we're going to bottom water so they soak soak the moisture up. All right. So I'm going to go fill this tray with water, and while we are taking our cuttings, this soil will soak water up from the bottom and saturate these pots. Okay, so those containers are soaking up their water. Next thing we need to do is go get our cuttings. But what we're going to do is bring a few things with us. So I've got some jars here full of water. The thing about taking cuttings is you want to immediately, as fast as possible, get that cutting from the plant into the new medium. Any delay means it's going to dry out really fast. So I like to put them in a jar of water so that I can continue to take cuttings and don't have to run back and forth. We could do it all at once. You can also put a wet paper towel inside of a Ziploc bag and stick them in there. You just need to keep the moisture around that cutting so that it kind of holds its own until you can get it into your new potting medium. The other thing is you really don't, like, let's say it's in a bag or I've got these in glass jars. I kind of don't want to sit that out in direct sun. Try to keep that sheltered while we're out making our cuttings. Okay, so I'm going to grab some snips. Now, you could use this kind of flower snip if you want, or just a regular Felco's. I'm going to grab my Felco's, although nothing that I'm cutting today is thick enough stem. These should work just fine. Now, there's a whole bunch of plants that you can do this to. You can do this for roses, so it doesn't have to just be some of the stuff that I'm doing today. There's a ton of things. You can do this for a lot of herbs, like rosemary. You can do this for tomatoes. You can literally, when you go to pinch out your those branches that come out, the suckers that come out, you can literally root those and have a whole new tomato plant. It might take a little longer than your season allows, but if you have a really long growing season, that is a great way to use those little guys that you pinch out. So this is something, and I would recommend you give it a try for lots of things, because so many things are easy to propagate this way. And if it fails, it fails, but you're only out a couple little stems off of a bigger plant. So, check out your garden, go through your back porch, things that you're like, I would love to have more of that, and then give this a try. Okay, so let's go in the cottage garden right now. It's direct sun, so I'm going to have to work quickly. But let's go grab a few things out of there. I think penstemon is one of them I'd like to take, and definitely some of the salvias. So let's go make some selections. Actually, before we even get to the cottage garden, I'm going to take some cuttings of this heliotrope. Now, one of the heliotropes we have here is a Proven Winners variety, which I'm almost certain would be trademarked and probably patented. This is not. This one is, this is not a patented or trademark variety. So I'm going to take some cuttings from this. Now, you want to get a really strong stem. You're only going to take 4 to 5 inches. Try not to, if you can, try not to take the ones with flowers, because this stem has already expended a lot of its energy into creating the flower. So back here we have some stems that have not done that, and they have all the necessary things on them. I will show you real close in just a minute here. Ooh, this one is just producing so many flowers. Okay, here's another stem I can take. Okay, so what we're going to do here is remove the bottom leaves. We're going to, when we go to actually put the cutting in, you'll see we're going to remove even more than this. But these leaves are going to wick away a lot of the moisture. And you can see it does have a little flower bud here. I'm going to pinch that out. Okay, so when we plant this, we'll probably cut most of this off, but we want to put at least 2 or 3 of these nodes under the surface of the soil. And you can really see it on this one here. You can see these nodes, they have leaves on them, right? That is where new stems are going to form, as well as leaves. So when we go to pop this one in to the medium, it's going to, we're going to want to make sure we plant it deep enough so that these nodes are under the soil, because that's where we're going to get roots. Okay. That's good enough for now. So these guys are going to go back in the greenhouse in that little jar of water, and then we'll continue on and get our other cuttings. Okay, here we have a beautiful salvia. I don't even remember the color of these. I think, I could be wrong, but I think this might be a chartreuse flower on this salvia. And this one blooms late in the season. Get that little katydid off of there. So I am going to take a couple of these, like I said, 4 or 5 inches down. This is a little, there we go, leaf hopper. I'm actually going to cut this one here because these two, and there's branches forming right there in the middle. Okay, and again, we're going to take off these big leaves because they will just leach water from the cutting. We'll do one more, maybe here. Okay, these guys can go in our jar. Okay, back here, we have a whole bunch of salvia, as you can see. This is a buddleia, but I cut it way back, so I'm not going to take any cuttings from that. I'm going to see if I can find some stems of this salvia that don't actually have blooms on them. Oh, I think I see one. Yes. This is actually a side shoot. And then, you know, the same holds true. We're going to take these off and these guys. There's a bug there. Okay, that can go into our jar. Now the bees are very busy back here, but I'm going to see if I can squeeze back and grab a couple of cuttings from this salvia without crushing too many plants or upsetting too many bees. Okay. Here I took a bit longer stem because I'm going to get 2 cuttings out of this one. How they branch there, we're going to get 2 cuttings out of that. Okay, this goes in the jar. Of course, we can do this for Nepeta as well. This Nepeta, I definitely am excited about cutting back because this one gets super floppy. I've already done a big cut on it already this year, but I love it so much, and this would be a great perennial out at the farm because it is a pollinator magnet. I wouldn't necessarily be using it for cut flowers, but even here I would love to have more of these in the garden. And like I said, I'm going to try to get as many cuttings as possible of each variety so that if/when some of these cuttings fail, there will always be a backup. You can also propagate hydrangeas this way, but all of my hydrangeas are proven winners ones, so I'm not going to do that. These are Agastaki that I started from seed. I'm definitely going to take cuttings from this. Love Agastaki. I don't even remember this variety, but they're doing great. Okay, so we've got multiple cuttings here. Okay, let's go to the front garden and get some buddleia. Okay, she's very tall and she's blooming a lot. I do need to come in here and deadhead, basically, is cut back all this stuff so that she'll start producing more blooms again, but I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to try to find some stems. Here's a good one that haven't flowered and I can use for cuttings. That's tough though, because pretty much every stem she's sending out flowers. This is just an amazing plant. I every year cut it back to about 6 inches, 18 inches off the ground. And every year it puts on about 7 feet of growth. It is insane. So fast. And like, it's crazy to me that it's a perennial plant and just grows this fast. Okay. All right, one more. These lower ones a little bit easier. There we go. Whoops, I destroyed that one. I was getting too rough. Okay, let's go get these guys potted up. Okay, so now we are ready to pot up our cuttings. I'm going to prepare the cutting first and then get these guys all settled in their new home, and then we'll do the rest of them. Okay, so we've got our pot. It is soaking wet because I filled this tray with water and let all the pots soak up all the water. So what we need is a pencil, and that will become clear in a minute, and some rooting powder. This is rooting hormone. You can do this or not. I find that it helps a bit, but you can also use apparently cinnamon. Never tried that. Basically, we're going to dip our cuttings in this rooting hormone, and it will help them speed up the process of creating roots. And then we have our cuttings, and we have to still prepare them a little bit more. So in this case, I'm going to want it to stand above the surface about that high. So I'm going to go ahead and leave these nodes on, but I am going to cut this leaf in half. That will just take away some of the need for the leaves to transpire and let go of all their water. So it helps the plant stay hydrated longer. And then we're going to dip our stem in this cutting hormone. In this rooting hormone. I'll put it around that node as well. Then I'm going to use my pencil. I'm going to make a hole in the side here, and I'm going to put my cutting in. Actually, I'm going to have to... So if I do this, there's not enough soil to cover that node, so I'm going to build the soil up around it, because otherwise I'd have to cut off that bottom one, and I want them to have enough nodes. So really important. The nodes are where the roots are going to come out, and they need to be obviously underneath the soil. So, and let's see how we can do this in this one. We can cut that and there. These might be better sizes. Okay, so this one's good, but again, we're going to cut the leaf in half. I was taught this by Monty Don at Gardener's World. I don't know if it's exactly necessary, but it does seem to help. They don't wilt as badly because they're not trying so hard to keep their all these upper leaves transpiring. Okay, and then this one, and we are going to that one's not going to make it under, so I'm going to cut it here, remove this leaf, and cut this in half. Okay, and then we're going to dip. And make sure I get those nodes. Make our hole. Pop in our cutting. I'm going to build the soil up around it. There we go. So now we just need to repeat that for the other cuttings. Okay, humidity dome is on. The little windows on the top are open. They're getting light, which they need, just not direct sunlight. And every couple of days, every day probably in the beginning, I'm going to take that dome off. I'm going to investigate, make sure nobody's got mold forming, because that can happen. Make sure nothing's rotting. If so, just pull those out. Make sure they don't need any extra water. And also give them a little bit of fresh air in there. And probably do a little bit of fanning. Like literally just take a tray and just fan it a little bit, get those stems to move slightly. That helps make them a little stronger. So now what? Now we wait. This is the hard part. But within 3 to 6 to maybe 8 to 10, it just depends on the variety of plant that you're starting from cuttings. They will start to form roots. And how will you know when they have root system? So there's two ways to know. One, you can look at the bottom of the container, and if you see roots coming out, obviously your cuttings have rooted. But you can also give them a gentle little tug, and if they don't just pop right out of the soil, then they actually are starting to root into the soil medium. So you just have to be patient. It does take babysitting. You can't just do this and walk away. If you do that, they're going to mold in there and or dry out. So you got to definitely keep on it, but it's worth it. This is free plants and it's fun. This is science. You get to do science and expand your collection of plants at very, very, very low cost. So it's also, like I said, fun. I would definitely urge you to give it a try. Even if you only take 4 cuttings from a single plant and do it in a little pot and just test your luck and see how it goes. Some of the easiest things to start are members of the mint family. Those you can always tell because they have square stems. So today we pretty much cut a lot of those. The Buddleia, Salvia, Agastache, Nepeta, all of those are usually pretty easy to root. Hydrangeas are very easy to root as well, but like I said, make sure you don't have a trademarked or patented variety that you're doing that with. You know, different houseplants are easy to propagate this way. So I don't have much experience in that at all, so I'm not going to list. Although things like pothos, you can totally do that. With pothos, it's even easier. You can just stick those in, take a cutting and stick it in a glass of water, and when it'll develop roots in the water, and then you can plant those up. That's water propagation. Hoya will do that as well. So those are super easy. So give this a try. Let me know in the comments if you've already done this or if you do this routinely. This is something that I try to do every year, but sometimes I forget. And then it's later in the year and I'm like, oh, I should have taken softwood cuttings. But then there's something called hardwood cuttings. Now, hardwood cuttings are done pretty much the same way, but they're taken during the dormant season. So these are plants that are completely asleep. They are, most of the time, they're deciduous plants that we're talking about. And you do the same kind of thing, but you still take this year's growth, but it will be not really fully wood. It'll be what we call semi-wood. So much firmer than a softwood cutting. But you take about the same amount, although sometimes it helps take a little bit longer cutting, 8 to 10 inches, and use a deeper pot. But you're going to do the same thing that we just did and use a rooting hormone, and it doesn't have any leaves, so you're not having to worry about transpiration. You will still need to worry about moisture loss, and so having it under a humidity dome is still a great idea. Just check on it frequently. You want your cuttings to be about the thickness of a pencil. If they're much thicker than that, they're harder to root, and also if they're smaller than that, they're harder to root. So kind of aim for that size, and you don't want it to have any growth on it. So you're just basically cutting sticks. But the same kind of process holds. Now we're probably going to do some hardwood cuttings this winter. There's some things that I would like to propagate that work best that way. So when we come around to that, that's a great winter project. We will take advantage of the downtime to do that. The only other issue with doing it in the wintertime, especially if you're in a really cold zone, is keeping them happy and alive in those very cold temperatures. Right now, my bigger chore is going to making sure that this greenhouse doesn't get over 100 degrees in here, that will be very hard on these cuttings. If we have a day that's looking like that, then I'll need to bring them inside and just put them in my kitchen where they can get some indirect light, but not have to worry about being out here because those kind of temperatures will probably kill them. Yeah, so that's it for taking cuttings. Like I said, let me know if you already do this or what you plan on doing. Yeah, there's so many options. I was just thinking geraniums, hardy geraniums, the regular geranium, like the regular big blousy geraniums that we grow. Those are all great for taking cuttings. And succulents, you don't even have to root those. You can use an individual leaf. Just break the leaves off of succulents or pick up the ones that have just fallen. Lay those on a tray of soil. Mist the tray a little bit. Get the soil just slightly damp. You don't even have to bury them. They will start to send out roots. And then you have new succulent plants. So plant propagation is really fun. It's super fun to grow things from seed because you can be exactly sure of exactly what you're getting. And it's also really fun to propagate because you are making a clone of that plant. So a little bit different from seed. If I collect seed from the zinnias at the farm and plant those, or collect seed from the dahlias at the farm, they will come back completely different to what I planted because they've been cross-pollinated by the pollinators with the other varieties that are around them. That's fun, but if you're going for a specific variety, if you want the repetition of that, then you either need seed that has been isolated or, which is what the seed companies are great with, right? They provide you seed that is, you're going to get what you get, right? What you ask for is what you get. But propagation is the other way to do that. And also dahlias. You could be propagating dahlias right now if you want to. You can take cuttings, do exactly what we just did. They will grow pretty fast. However, be aware that chances are you will not get a full giant plant producing flowers and tuber by the end of the season if you start them this late. Generally, when I take dahlia cuttings, I do that in like March. I will pre-sprout the tubers in a pot. I'll stick them in a pot like this with the tuber neck sticking out of the soil, and then it will send up sprouts. I will cut off those sprouts and pot those up, and they become other plants that are identical to the parent plant. So that would be the way to do dahlias. But like I said, doing them early in the season guarantees you're going to get a full plant that flowers for you and everything. But doing it this late in the season, you may not, which would be okay. You could still overwinter it. It'll, lose its leaves and stuff, but it will still produce a tuber that you can then plant out next year. So I could go on forever about this, obviously, but I hope that you had fun today. And I hope you give this a try in your own garden. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.